Yep, go ahead.
The trip down took about a week, and then it was about a week back, and so I guess we were in Mexico City for 4 weeks. We, on the way down, after a couple of days, we kind of got in the habit of swimming a lot at night. We stayed in nice motels. This is in the late 50s, and so I'm surprised, but there were nice motels there in Mexico with swimming pools, and would travel long hours. That bus driver must have been exhausted. Would travel, it seemed like 12 or 14 hours, and the roads weren't always that great, but would kind of sleep there on the bus on the way because it got kind of boring. But it was nice at night to swim. And then when we got there, we were assigned families. I think there were about 4 girls that stayed in the house where I stayed. And it seems like I had a private room. I don't remember sleeping with anybody. And at night we would put our dirty clothes out and just leave them there somewhere on the floor, I guess. And when we came back the next day, they were washed and ironed.
Wow.
It's like I was a queen. My clothes, I just put them there somewhere, and they were washed and ironed the next day because they had maids, and these maids were not treated that nicely. The family members were really friendly to us, and they had a couple of daughters that were real sweet, but they didn't really consider the maids as quite human. It didn't seem like the maids had not been to school and could not really read, and so after we'd been there for a while, they started asking us to go to the grocery store with them because we knew a little Spanish, and we had to converse with the family and the maids in Spanish. And at the grocery store, if the label on the can did not have a picture, they did not know what they were buying, of course, because they couldn't read, and they would ask us to read it. And it was really a sad situation. I suppose it's still that way down there. There's a big gap between the wealthy and the poor. And one of the maids had a baby. She basically left that child alone most of the day. I think she'd go down at noon and could check on it. She worked long hours. That baby just was down there, I suppose, crying half the time. And the maids worked really hard. When I think about it now, I should have I shouldn't have been so happy to get my clothes taken care of so well. I should have been more careful and worn them for 3 or 4 days because I just added work to that poor maid. I had good food, but one day, one weekend, for some reason, we kind of had an exchange with another family, that were good, more traditional. This was kind of a modern family. And the other family, the first day we were there, they served us something that was kind of thick and brown and not too appetizing looking. We asked them what it was, and it was how do you say blood? And it was something frito. And so I realized sangre frito. Sangre frito, anyway, it was like fried blood. And I put it all on my plate, but I just stirred it around. I didn't want to eat that fried blood. But everything else they had was good, but that was just a good dish for them. And we went to a lot of museums, and we went to a pyramid. We went to a lot of wonderful places that I'd love to go to again. We went to the markets where they tried to sell you things. I bought a few things there, and they would always tell us that they're very pretty. You should pay them money, and I'd try to talk them down because I didn't have a whole lot of money, but I had probably 10 times as much as they had. And I'd say, no, it's muy feo, which means it's very ugly. I don't want to buy it, it's very ugly. And we went to church there. They had very few wards there, but we all went together to a church. They were very happy to have us. There's a young woman that taught the gospel doctrine class, and I thought she was a pretty good teacher. I could understand what she was saying. I think she talked slowly for us. And now there's lots of wards in the temple there, so. But I think that there's only maybe one ward at that time.
So was this summer 1960?
1960. So I would write quite often to my mother and say, why don't you write me more often and tell me what my daughters are doing? And she, poor lady, had all her usual chores plus those two little girls that weren't easy. So anyway, then we came home another week, coming home, and it was wonderful to get back and see the girls. And they kind of looked at me at first and clung to their grandmother and like, who's this lady? But in a minute they came to me and were very happy to see me. So the next year was my last year, and I had to do student teaching, of course, and I'd been taking a lot of history classes, not realizing that history classes in high school are taught by the coaches. I don't know if I'd ever got a job. But besides that, I found out that I wasn't very good about handling kids, especially junior high kids. I did student teaching in Lehigh, in a junior high. I did mostly English, though, which was my minor, and they needed somebody in the English class. The first day, or maybe it was the second, the cooperating teacher, which is the real teacher, said, I'm not feeling well. And she was probably about 60. And she went down and stayed in the lounge, and that's where she stayed the whole month I was there. And the kids I never saw her, maybe first thing in the morning, except to say hello. She was not in the room, she didn't give me any guidance, but the kids were not very well behaved. I remember one day, two boys that always acted like they liked me, but they got in a fight, and they were fighting in the classroom, and I kept begging them, please stop, you've got to stop them, stop. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to actually get in the middle of the fight and try to break them up.
Well, yeah, they're pretty strong.
Yeah, they were as big as they were 8th and 9th graders, they're big. Eventually they quit, and I guess we went on with class, I don't know. Can't remember. Nobody told me how to handle discipline problems. The principal didn't even talk to me and say, if they're ornery, send them down. He didn't say that. Nothing was ever said. And so I realized, man, I can't do this. And I wasn't that looking forward to teaching anyway, because I was always kind of shy, and I didn't really assert myself as good as I should have. And so I was just really wondering, what on earth am I going to do? So I found out that when you've already earned a degree in secondary education, you could earn one in primary education for not too many more hours. So I did have to go an extra summer, but I better do that, and so I started changing over to primary, and
which we call elementary now. We call it elementary ed, right?
Elementary, yeah, I guess that's what they call it then too. I don't know. So I took not too many classes, maybe just a reading class. I didn't have to take too many, and then I went again to Lehigh. I think I took a reading class and an elementary education class. Then I did my student teaching again in Lehigh.
Was this summer of 1961?
No, it was in the spring.
Spring, okay.
But I took a couple classes and so I wasn't really happy doing all this driving to Lehigh. 20 miles, and they didn't have a freeway then. So I had a few traffic lights, not too many. It wasn't like it is now with 100,000 people there. But Joe again, it was just, this student teaching time was like the difference between night and day. Maybe it's because it's a man teacher. He gave me so many good tips about how to teach in elementary. I probably still not very good, but he stayed with me the whole time.
And
He
helped
said,
you.
I'm getting paid for this. Well, of course he was getting his regular salary. Plus, as a cooperating teacher, I found out later when I taught school, you get a little bit more extra money, maybe a couple hundred extra. He said, it's my job to stay with you, and he gave me a lot of good tips. Although a few things I wasn't able to use. One was he started the class with prayer, which was a nice thing, I guess, but there were a few kids in there, maybe 4 or 5, that weren't LDS, and maybe they were even agnostic, I don't know, but they didn't seem to know how to pray. But the person that said the prayer got to take the ball out. The ball, I think it was a soccer ball, but it was very, all the kids wanted to do that. The other kids were their friends the day they took that soccer ball. So every kid in there, nobody refused to say the prayer. Of course, you can't make a kid say a prayer, but they all were eager to get up and say the prayer. So it really made the class start out nicely, but I wasn't ever able to use that tip when I got to New Mexico.
Right, that was just about the time it was changing all over the country about that time.
About 1960, I guess. Well, to go back a little bit, that year at Christmas, I was home again. I always went home for Christmas, and Mother asked me if I would like to have a date with Jack Palmer, who is Madge Gabart's brother. And I said, Jack Palmer, I don't know him. And she said, well, you know him. He used to live here. But he's 10 years older than me. I think he'd moved away
for a long time.
I was in grade school. When I was 6, he was 16, so that didn't mean anything to me. And but I knew his little sister Ruth Mae Palmer. She was my good friend. Of course, I knew Madge, so I said sure. And I guess I was lonely, and he seemed like he was lonely. We were attracted to each other. And when I went back up to school, once or twice a month, he would come all the way up there. I think came on the bus one time he drove. He was living in Farmington with Madge, although he had a house in Moab, he rented it out. And so he came up a few times. That was a happy time and an exciting time. We made plans to get married then after school was out. But I did have to stay there and finish class, and I still owed for the house that summer. So I can't remember if I owed $105 a month for that summer.
I'm trying to remember. It's in your anniversary is June something.
Yeah, June the
10th. June 10th.
Joe, the next year, Joe was born June the 1st.
12 months
Our
later.
anniversary was June the 10th. I always said to Jack when he couldn't remember, Joe was born. He couldn't remember which was your birthday and which was our anniversary.
Right.
Which one was first and which one was 10th. Remember, Joe was born before we got married. Just remember that. So I did stay there a little bit after we got married and finished the class, and I guess I just had to pay for the rest of the rent on the house. Because I can't remember renting it out to anybody, finding anybody that would. In the summer, it's difficult to. It used to be really difficult to find renters for a house in Provo. So that's why they were willing to maybe rent it to me a little bit cheaper, because I would rent it year-round and pay the rent year-round.
Did you guys then live in Provo for a few months?
He stayed there with me a little bit, but then Jack had a renter for his house for a year or two, and he had her move so that we could move into that house in Moab when I got through school. So then I graduated. President McKay was at our graduation. They used to shake your hand.
It's nice, huh?
That was kind of exciting, and
Yeah.
and I walked and like Wyatt says he's going to do. I'm going to walk.
And somebody had the kids.
Yeah.
Someone holding the kids in the audience.
I don't know. Cleona and Dwayne had graduated the year before. Maybe Mother came up to graduation. She might have. Somebody had them. Maybe Jack.
Yeah.
They were 5 years old then. So they were excited to get a father. They called him Mr. Palmer.
For a while.
They couldn't say their R's. Mr. Palmer. I guess later they called him Jack.